also Christmas. We're filming a video today that is sure not to step on any toes. Now, if you know me, it would be a really funny joke because I only have toes on one foot. I don't really have that many to step on, but more people do. So here we are today because why not? And I did say in some of the comments after my last video on Hanukkah that I was going to be addressing the Christmas topic. That said, let's get into it.
Hey, I'm Kinsey. I'm a multi-passionate homesteader who follows Yahusha. I like to talk a lot, and I'm a little goofy, but I really believe in intentional living, and I love my family. This is our story at the Flocking Farm, and this is the Live Out Loud podcast.
The hardest part about filming this video so far has been deciding what to leave out. I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, I cannot cover every single aspect of Christmas in this video. It'd be a 3-day long video. There's so much data to go through. I have been pouring through the data. Kind of on a timeline because my kids are asleep and I'm hoping to be able to get this filmed because my hope is to get this posted before Christmas, and it's already Monday. Christmas is on Wednesday. So I decided to start the conversation on Christmas as a reaction video to Michael Knowles because last year when I watched this video, my husband showed it to me, I had to keep pausing it because I wanted to scream. And let it be known, I'm a huge Michael Knowles fan. I especially love a lot of his long-form content where he interviews people. There's one specifically on a witch interview that he did that I thought was absolutely fantastic. In general, I really enjoy him. I think he's an awesome guy. He seems to be extremely metered, and what comes across to me, at least in screen more often than not, is he's extremely kind. With that preface, when it comes to Christmas, I vehemently disagree, and I think how he reacted to the last year's video about pagans is missing the mark on numerous fronts, including historical accuracy. Context: I am not a pagan. I am a Torah-observant follower of the Messiah, Yahusha. You probably know his name is Jesus. So I'm coming at this from a biblical lens, okay? I'm not a pagan, but I do believe that the Christmas holiday is pagan based on all of the research that I have done. Because Christmas is such a big topic to cover, I thought that this would be a good bite-sized way to start diving into some of the detail. I do my best to try to consolidate the amount of information that I have found. But without further ado, let's get on to reacting to Michael Knowles' video.
Ho, 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 Merry Advent. It's not Christmas yet, okay? But we are getting ready for Christmas, and we are preparing for Christmas by watching a bunch of woke Christmas TikToks. Take it away.
Here are some Christmas traditions that we borrowed from pagans, and by borrowed I mean stole and then condemned and then rebranded. Number 1, Santa Claus. Santa Claus is actually an Old Norse pagan god named Odin, and Odin had a long white beard and he was old, and he rode around through the sky on an 8-legged horse delivering presents to people.
Put a pause there. Santa Claus, also known as jolly old Saint Nick, is not a pagan god named Odin. Santa Claus is a saint named Nicholas. That's why we call him Saint Nicholas. And he was said to have given presents to little kids, and what he was also known for was, according to legend, slapping the heresiarch Arius at the Council of Nicaea. The story, probably apocryphal, but legends can tell us a lot about reality.
All right, we're going to put a pause there. Okay, so much to unpack here. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my computer, which is what I'm watching the reaction video on. I'm sure when I'm editing, I'm going to put it up here, but you see me looking over here a lot. That's why, because Michael Knowles is in the room right over here chit-chatting with me. Okay, we are sure to not ruffle any feathers. Now, I've written a lot of this out. I want to kind of touch some of the key points so it doesn't just sound like I'm reading off of a script, but I've tried to consolidate all of my wild, rambling thoughts because all of those that know me know I'm a very extroverted person. I talk a lot, hence the name of this podcast. So if it sounds like it's a little bit rehearsed and that I'm reading off of a script, it's because, well, I've kind of written myself a script so I stay on point, okay? Good old Saint Nick. Saint Nicholas, he was a 4th century bishop. We do have historical record of him. He is renowned for his acts of generosity and kindness, which may have inspired some of the legendary traditions surrounding Santa. However, it is just that legend, because a lot of what we know about Saint Nick is folklore. There's a lot of folklore that surrounds him. often depicted as giving gifts to children, but really this stems from his legendary accounts of charitable deeds. We don't have any historical evidence that he actually gave gifts to children. Potentially a source for Santa. However, this gal does have a point, because a lot of the legends of Santa Claus, we can't overlook Norse culture that was around well before St. Nicholas was. There are stunning resemblances with Odin and the Santa Claus that we know today. For context, we need to keep in mind that Odin and Yule worship have been around since the Iron Ages. So, Odin worship predates Catholicism by a lot. It was celebrated in ancient cultures long before Christmas. The term Yule itself comes from the Old Norse Hjul, which referred to the midwinter festival surrounding the winter solstice. They were worshipped around the first millennium. We can date oral tradition back to at least 2,500 years ago. This is old. This is Iron Age, okay? In Norse mythology, Odin was said to ride an 8-legged horse, Sleipnir, through the sky during the midwinter period around the winter solstice and the celebration of Yule. Santa is famously depicted with a sled pulled by 8 reindeer. Odin was associated with giving gifts over this time as well, as a reward to those who honored him and followed him in the season. He was the leader of the wild hunt, a ghostly procession of spirits that rode through the sky during the winter months. This supernatural event was seen as a way to cleanse the earth and punish the wicked. Okay. I'm not saying that all of Santa is based off of Odin or that Saint Nick himself is pagan. That's not the case that I'm making whatsoever. There are many more parallels that we could draw between Odin and Santa. Suffice to say, while St. Nicholas certainly played a role in shaping the Santa Claus that we know today, the Norse influence cannot be overlooked. The parallels between Odin and Santa are striking, especially in their associations with winter solstice celebrations, nautical journeys, bearded fatherly appearances, and roles as gift bringers. While St. Nick has his own generosity in his legendary accounts. Again, we don't have any historical evidence that he actually ever gave gifts to children. One cannot in good faith say the many aspects of him weren't melded with the pre-existing traditions that already surrounded Odin worship around the winter solstice. Given this context, I would have to assume that Michael Knowles is saying Santa has no other basis in anyone outside of St. Nicholas, and that St. Nick himself has no other ties to any influence from other Norse figures of worship. That's the conclusion that I'm drawing here, which on its face seems absolutely preposterous given all of the parallels that were between Odin worship and the Santa Claus we know today. Odin was known to already have these traditions as we start Christianizing pagan holidays surrounding the solstice, which we will get to later because we are going to be diving into those details. Likely Christian type figures like St. Nicholas were being melded with already pre-existing traditions that were there, such as Odin, to create the Santa Claus that we know today. Honestly, it's a little bit of church tradition and it's a little bit of Norse mythology. In my opinion, that's what the data shows. Yes, I'm in a different outfit. You'll figure out why later in this video, but I wanted to jump back in here because a point I missed earlier was, why are we all just glazing over the fact that Santa requires us to deceive and lie to children? Like, that's an issue in and of itself, regardless of where the roots of Santa Claus came from. We're deceiving and lying to children if we're placating into this tradition. Nothing that we have ever been comfortable with as a family, which is why I never grew up with Santa Claus, even though my father was from a Catholic background, my mother was from an evangelical background. We came to Torah later in life. But even with all of that, we never placated to Santa because they didn't believe in lying to us. So, just food for thought.
Similarity between this thing that happened in the Gospels and some myth. Therefore, the Gospels are...
Pause it there. St. Nicholas isn't anywhere in the Gospels, okay? We're not saying that there's a similarity of what's in the Gospels and other legend. I guess I haven't watched her full video for full context, but let's separate out here what we're talking about, because I'm talking about church tradition, not scripture. Legend can tell us a lot. There is legend that happened to be in a lot of pagan cultures that got melded in with the Christian faith. However, Santa Claus and Saint Nicholas, they themselves are not part of the biblical corpus. So let's make sure that we're being really clear with our terminology here. I'm not trying to debunk the Bible. I am trying to debunk Christmas because I do believe that it has pagan roots.
And some myth. Therefore, the Gospels are fake and it's all just a repackaging of a pagan myth. No.
Christianity is not a repackaging of a pagan myth. Christmas is a repackaging of pagan traditions.
Christianity is mythical in the sense that it partakes of types. It partakes of grand narrative. It happens to be, however, the true myth.
Agreed.
It is a myth that actually happened. Yes, it is mythical for a man to die and then rise from the dead. That's a theme in myth. It also literally happened.
Agreed.
In Christianity. So just because something is mythical does not mean that it can't be true.
True. Again, I think the whole Bible is true. I don't think Christmas is true. But we'll get into more of that later.
Number 2, the 12 days of Christmas, or the concept of Christmas in general. This comes from Yule, or winter solstice, which is a 12-day pagan winter holiday.
No, put a pause there. That's just so fake.
No, it's not. It's not fake. Okay, so we're going to go a little bit into Sol Invictus, which he's going to get into, and into Saturnalia. When we look back at the traditional Julian calendars, the winter solstice was at December 25th. However, Saturnalia, which is where the 12 days of Christmas come from, never overlapped with the winter solstice until much later. Saturnalia was a pagan festival that surrounded the winter time, but it always ended before the winter solstice. That's where 12 days of Christmas comes from. Christmas, however, being on the 25th, we're going to get into this more. It's more about Sol Invictus, but actually for me, I'm not going to die on the hill of Sol Invictus. I'm going to die on the hill of solstice worship, because we can see based on the Julian calendar that solstice worship happened on December 25th since the Iron Ages. Like, solstice worship is nothing new. It's been around pretty much since the dawn of time. All pagan cultures worshipped around the winter solstice because all pagan cultures worshipped the sun, the moon, and the stars. These were the god figures of the time. We're going to get into more detail, and he will bring up Sol Invictus, and I have other specific things to say about the early church fathers as well that we will tie into. But please keep in mind, Saturnalia and Sol Invictus are two separate things. Saturnalia was never over the winter solstice. This is a different festival entirely. But when it does come to December 25th, it's a lot more pagan-rooted than this video would like to lead you to believe. Let's continue.
Fake.
You are fake news.
They bring up all these different pagan feasts, many of which started after Christmas, by the way. The one that they usually go back to is Sol Invictus. There are others. She mentions Yule, but there's Sol Invictus, there's Mithras, there's Saturnalia, there are all these feasts. People will say, well, the Christmas holiday was celebrated by the Christians as a way to lure the pagans who were celebrating Sol Invictus over to celebrate their new holiday.
That's exactly what we're saying. That's exactly what my point of view here is.
But that's not true. The earliest evidence we have of Christmas is the chronography of 354. That's the earliest textual evidence we have of this on a calendar. But it's also the earliest textual evidence we have of the Feast of Sol Invictus. So in all likelihood, the Feast of Sol Invictus was actually made by the pagans as a response to Christianity. The Bishop Hippolytus of Rome explains why Christmas is celebrated on the 25th, and it has nothing to do with some stupid pagan feast. It's because Christians believe that a divine life is perfect, so it's exactly a certain number of years. Christ lived exactly for 33 years, and the early Christians understood the conception of Christ to have occurred on Good Friday, which is the day that he died.
Okay, I'm not going to get into Good Friday today because that's going to be a whole nother video. There are already so many logical fallacies around why it is not possible for Good Friday to be a thing. Table that conversation for now. We will likely get into this around Easter time in the spring as I continue to put out more faith-related content. I'm not going to dive into this rabbit hole today, not because I don't want to talk about it, but because this video is going to be long enough as it is, and it's not the point of the video, but we will be touching on things like Good Friday in future videos to come. I just want to put that out there. It's not something I don't want to touch on, but it's going to rabbit hole too many different ways, so we will touch on that later.
When you've got the dating of the conception of Christ to Good Friday, then you fast forward 9 months later, you get December 25th. And if that coincides even roughly with certain pagan feasts. Sure, there might be
It's the whole
some
reason it's there.
mythical or pagan celebrations there as well, but Christianity is the true myth. It's not just a baptizing of certain pagan traditions. It's a thing that really
Putting pause
happened.
there. You're right. Christianity is the true myth. The tradition surrounding these holidays is a baptizement of pagan customs. That's where I draw the line. There is a very distinct line, and we are going to go into the early church fathers to talk about this. So let's start diving in a little bit. He talks as if it is assumed fact that all the early church fathers agreed. We do know that, one, I would like to put it out there. Do we have any representation in the entire renewed covenant, you know it as the New Testament, that anybody who followed Yahusha celebrated his birthday? Well, that was an important date to them. Okay, I get that that's not the entire argument, but we're going to continue on. The timeline of Christmas and other feasts. I like how he specifically talked about Sol Invictus and how it was on the calendar after who is it? It's a specific Hippocrates of Rome. I would like to note that historically, the written down date in the commentary on Daniel by Hippocrates of Rome predates the written down Sol Invictus appointed holiday by Aurelian by 60 years. Historically, that is a blip in time. A blip in time. But I will give you that we do have a written account of December 25th, not as being accepted by the majority of believers, but as being a proposed birth of Jesus before Sol Invictus was put on a calendar. That I'll give you. However, you completely glaze over things like Yule. Differently dressed Kinsey popping in here again. I like the fact that we basically lumped in Yuletime worship and Mithras worship, and as if they're the same thing, and we didn't even talk about them at all. We'll sprinkle them in because we have the facts on this one, but we're not actually going to address the fact that we know that these ancient deities have been worshipped. I think Mithras worship has been around for at least 3,000 years in written record. Written record. Now, let me go to some of my notes here. Mithra has a long history in both Persian and Roman cultures, though it started more in Persian cultures. Our first written account can be found in texts up to 1500 BC, making this ancient deity around 3,000 years old. Although our older records are detailed in Indo-Iranian texts, so even older, worship of Mithra eventually spread to the Roman and Hellenistic cultures. We also know that based on the time, the Julian calendar was used because our Gregorian calendar did not come until a much later date. When the Julian calendar was used, the winter solstice fell on December 25th. This is observable, verifiable historical facts. It has shifted around since we've changed calendars, but back when the Julian calendar was being used, December 25th was the winter solstice, which is when all of these pagan festivals were taking place. Moving on. Additionally, during the Hellenistic period, which was 323 to 331 BCE, Egyptian solar renewal myths merged with Greek and Roman religious practices, further embedding solstice-related themes into Mediterranean culture. This time was rich with solar, agricultural, and renewal-related celebrations since basically as far back as we can tell. Now, Hippocrates of Rome, I am going to go ahead and bring up the reference here. This was, the best we can date it is 209 to 219 after death, AD. Mentions in the commentary of Daniel, quote, "For the first advent of our Lord in the flesh, when he was born in Bethlehem, we have said happened in the 42nd year of Augustus on the 25th of the month of December." Here's the thing. Why would Hippocrates of Rome be theorizing that it would be the 25th of December? That's my question to you. Why the date? Because we know it cannot be based on scriptural accuracy. Many of the early church fathers who predate Hippocrates of Rome, many of them already assert this in their writings. How do we know that? Because the Bible tells us it is not possible for him to have been born in winter. It's literally one of the only times of year it's not possible. Why? Let's pull up some scripture. Luke 2, 1 through 11. And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was made when Cyrenius, the governor of Syria, and all went to be taxed, everyone in his own city. And Joseph went out from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth, into Judea, into the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, to be taxed with Mary, his espoused wife, being great with child. And so it was that, while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them at the inn. And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over the flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them. And they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you a son is born this day of David, a Savior, which is Christ the Lord, Yeshua HaMashiach. I'm reading it in English for simplicity for you guys. Usually you know that I like to read my Sefer version that uses the Hebraic names, but for the sake of simplicity today, we're going to go ahead and use the KJV translation. Other early church fathers recognized this account, including but not limited to Origen of Alexandria, Saint Jerome, Theophilus of Antioch. Hopefully I'm pronouncing these guys' names correctly. I apologize if I'm not. But all of these guys, except St. Jerome, I think that he post-dates Hypocritus of Rome, but the other two do not. They predate him by a lot. They all touch on the scriptures that directly relate to Jesus' birth, which, due to the shepherds abiding in the field, as well as the census taking place, could not have been in the winter months. So if scriptural accuracy cannot be the foundation on which this date was chosen by Hypocritus of Rome, one has to then question his motives. Would it then be ridiculous for me to put forward to you, given our body of research, this was indeed attempting to Christianize a pre-existing pagan practice around the solstice? Because we know, even based on the other early church fathers, it could not have possibly been in winter. And I don't think Hypocritus of Rome didn't understand how the winter months worked and how the shepherds would not be in the field in the middle of winter. I think he was probably pretty savvy as far as it came to understanding weather and climate. Putting that forward, there has to be a motive as to why we would have chosen the 25th of December. I'm not just going to say that these early church fathers said that. I am going to give you some things to actually go and look at. I believe Tertullian's De Idolatera on idolatry may hold the key, written around 200 AD, contains one of the earliest Christian critiques of pagan religious practices. In this work, Tertullian addresses the issue of Christian involvement in pagan rituals, particularly the celebration of pagan solstice festivals. He writes, quote, "The customs of pagans are the cause of evil which they are condemned for, and you too are imitators of these customs. But if they do not worship the sun, why do they observe the day when it is reborn?" De Idolatera 14. His words suggest an awareness of pagan solar festivals around the winter solstice, and he warns against Christians aligning themselves with such traditions. The holiday of Sol Invictus was likely well established before its written accounts, but even with the unlikely possibility it wasn't, there can be no doubt that pagan cultures definitely had some form of worship during the solstice long before Hypocritus of Rome. A pattern repeated as God's people often fall into adopting the custom of the heathen, which we see all over the original Testament. Okay, I'm gonna have to take a pause here. I'm watching my kids on my baby monitor and they have woken up and they are screaming for me. If you see me in a completely different outfit, looking completely different in the second half of this video, that is why I need to go take care of my children. I will see you in just a minute. Okay, I'm back. New look today. Mom life. Things get crazy.
It's a thing that really happened.
Number 3, kissing underneath the mistletoe. This plant is really sacred in a lot of pagan rituals. For Romans, it honored the god Saturn, and to appease Saturn, they would have fertility rituals underneath the mistletoe.
In terms of mistletoe, I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. Like, this woman's wrong about everything else, so she's probably wrong about that, but I don't know, maybe.
Okay, let's go into greenery just a little bit here. Again, not one of my main points, but something to be addressed because this gal did bring it up. Mistletoe in Celtic and Norse cultures held a deep symbolic significance. For the Celts, especially the Druids, it was a sacred plant associated with healing, fertility, and protection. there's all sorts of folklore that does surround mistletoe, but yes, they did used to hang it frequently in pagan cultures. They also used to bring a lot of greenery in as a celebration of remembering life, which I honestly think this is really ironic that we're bringing greenery in to remember life during the dark times of the year, where when you cut a Christmas tree down and you bring it inside, it's slowly dying. Am I the only one that finds the irony in this? In Norse mythology, mistletoe played a central role in the tragic death of the god Baldur, making it a symbol of both death and rebirth. Although mistletoe itself isn't pagan, how cultures cultivated their use over time definitely has become so. Especially the tradition of kissing under the mistletoe. Yeah, okay, we have a guest star, Enoch, for a portion of today's video. Let's continue. I think the point I was making, the way mistletoe has been used by pagans has created traditions over the years, but I don't think that you can say mistletoe itself is pagan because who created it? You know what I'm saying? So I think it's all in how we use it.
It could be.
Number 4, the Yule star, in which each point represents one of the 5 different elements. Pagans used to put this on top of their Yule trees. And lo and behold, we now put stars on top of our Christmas trees, and we have the audacity to call the pentagram satanic.
Put a pause there. What does the star represent at Christmas time? Symbol of the occult and the devil, or the star that announced Christmas? The symbol probably most associated with Christmas itself. I think it would probably be the latter.
Yeah, I'm going to give this point to Michael Knowles. I did research. I couldn't find anywhere where there was a Yule star on top of a tree in any of the historical evidence, anywhere, really. I'm sure this is something that came about later, but we don't even have record of Christmas trees until closer to the 19th century, as far as I'm aware. I searched, I couldn't find the data, and yeah, we have it in the biblical text that there was the Star of Bethlehem that did announce Yahushua's birth. That is something that is biblical. So I give this point to Michael Knowles. I don't think that there's any backing to say that the Yule star and the Star of Bethlehem, that you can claim that the roots of the star are pagan. I haven't seen it in history.
Number 5, hanging ornaments on trees. Each of these ornaments represented a god like Saturn or even a family's personal patron saints. Number 6, decking the halls, wreaths, Christmas trees. Pagans would put these up so that they would have some life and some greenery during the otherwise super cold and lifeless winter.
Sure, yeah, that's true. I mean, the image, I was sitting out the other night in my courtyard and I was looking at the dead trees outside and my Christmas tree on the inside with the fire going and the lights on and everything. And I thought, wow, what a beautiful symbol of the incarnation. What a beautiful symbol of Christmas. We are living in this world that has been marked by sin and death, and things die, and we will die too.
Life sucks, and then you die.
But then you look inside and you say, wait, there is hope. There actually is hope, and there is life, and there can be life everlasting, like with an evergreen tree. I mean, this is even getting back to her point about the star. Let's not forget the star.
I still think it's hilarious. Okay, hilarious isn't the right term, but very ironic that evergreen trees are evergreen until you cut them down and bring them inside, and then they start their process of decay. Just think it's ironic, that's all I'm saying.
The star that announces the birth of Christ is an astrological symbol. Plenty of pagans and occult sort of people looked up to the stars for signs. But because God is the God of the heavens and the earth, He's the God of everything, He takes that astrological sign and it brings these magi, these non-Christians, non-Jews, over to see the true King, Jesus Christ. Keep going.
7, Christmas caroling, pagan. 8, eggnog, Norse.
Singing is pagan now? The pagans get a monopoly on singing? I don't know, man. You know.
9, Yule log, obviously pagan.
So I sympathize with this argument here. Like, the pagans don't get to co-opt everything. They don't get to co-opt singing, they don't get to co-opt sweets, and they don't get to co-opt alcohol. Like, there's a difference between worshiping the creator and the creation. I sympathize with his argument here because I'm actually in agreement. The pagans don't get to co-opt everything. However, in particular, I thought some information on the Yule log would be interesting. Because I'm not saying they get to co-opt sweets, but the Yule log does have quite a history associated with it. So let's dig in. In pagan cultures, the Yule log, it was common to burn a large log over the course of the solstice celebration. Some traditions included the practice of keeping a piece of the Yule log to use as kindling for next year's fire, symbolizing continuality and protection. In some pre-Christian European rituals, large bonfires were part of the winter solstice celebrations. These bonfires were just about the return of the light and sometimes included human and animal sacrifices to appease the gods and the spirits. The Yule log itself was sometimes seen as representative of being a sacrificed being or force, symbolizing the cleansing of evil spirits and the world's renewal. So there is some association there specifically with the Yule log because it was something that was habitually done over the winter solstice period. Additionally, as we're looking into greenery, because this is another one that I was mentioning, additional guest, Elisheva is joining us as well. I'm trying, guys. I'm really trying to get this film for you. Okay. We touched a little bit on holly, but I wanted to touch a little bit more on some of the greenery. During the Roman festival of Saturnalia, which we covered a little bit earlier, Saturnalia would precede the solstice worships. This is where 12 Days of Christmas comes from. It was around solstice time, but always ended before the winter solstice. Roman festival celebrated around the winter solstice involved feasting, decorating homes with greenery, holly, ivy. Tradition of decorating with greenery carried over the winter celebrations. So take it for what you will, you know. All in all, were the use of evergreens common amongst pagan cultures to symbolize life? Yeah. Are all decorations pagan? Or how are they used and idolatrized today pagan? I'm going to make an argument for the Christmas tree that's not founded in history, but that is founded in personal conviction. I have an issue adorning my home with something that Wiccans don't have an issue adorning their home with at this very same time of year. Like, to me, that's just a red flag in and of itself. It's something that is brought inside our homes. It's something that's adorned. You put presents under it. It's a central focus, and it's something that there is no opposition from those who practice witchcraft and stuff to be adorning in their homes as well. So that's a personal conviction thing. That's not based on historical facts or anything. Just personally, I don't think that you can make a historical argument for the fact that the Christmas tree was an idol. I know people like to bring up Jeremiah, where it talks about cutting down a tree and bringing it in our house and adorning it in silver and gold. I'll go ahead and put that Bible verse up on the screen so you can reference it. But there's an argument that's made here that it was about carving graven images into it and making it an idol. Thing is, whether or not that was the case, I would make the argument that today it's become an idol. But again, that's a personal argument. This isn't a fact-based historical argument. So take that for what you will. All of that to say, is all greenery pagan? I don't think so. Should we be adorning our homes with it? That I will leave up to you, my dear viewer.
Mama.
Yes, honey.
Milk. For me.
Yeah?
Hotel.
Yeah?
See hotel. The shoes.
That's mine? Glass?
Guys.
Yeah, glass.
Pagan. And number 10, my favorite, December 25th being Jesus' birthday. It was celebrated as Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, which means the birth of the invincible sun.
We've covered
Dedicated
this.
to Mitra, or the Roman soul, until it was stolen by Pope Julius I and made into Jesus' birthday. So the birth of the invincible sun became the birth of the invincible sun.
So again, as I mentioned earlier, that's just completely fake. There's no evidence of that whatsoever.
That is bullshit.
I would defy that woman to show me the evidence that the Feast of the Unconquered Sun ever existed, that it was ever attested to before the celebrations of Christmas.
Can we find written account of Sol Invictus? No. Can we definitively say, based on historical evidence, that the winter solstice was on December 25th and solstice worship was rampant during all of human history? We absolutely can. The evidence is there if you want to see it. You can have Sol Invictus, but you can't have solstice worship. Here we go.
Cannot find it. That does not exist. No. But furthermore, to go back to what she was saying, eggnog, pagan, cake, pagan, pagan. No, I don't think so. I don't think you get to claim dairy, alcohol,
I agree.
and sweets as pagan. If those things are pagan, then I guess everything's pagan.
He's pagan, 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 pagan.
Are there any other
pagans
I should know about?
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stop here, because the rest of the video is more political commentary, of which I agree with. My main course in today's video was to address some of the pagan claims, because I do believe that this is an entirely pagan holiday that we have tried to Christianize, and I don't think as believers that we should be following it. Full stop. That's it. I would like to just throw in there, whoever is responsible for putting memes into the Daily Wire's clips is unhinged. Some of their memes, I'm like, where on earth did you even get that from? I have no idea. That aside, yes, I agree. Like, God is the one that created these things. How we are interacting with creation is going to determine whether we go too far or not. And a lot of this stuff, like, should you not have any greenery in your home? I think that's going to be a really personal choice based on your convictions themselves. However, what I do think is black and white and very clear is that December 25th, based on the calendar that they had at the time, that is when the winter solstice fell. This is a date that is steeped in ritualistic worship of other gods other than Yahweh. This is something that has been monopolized by the Christian church, but the roots of it, you can't deny solstice worship because that's the oldest records that we have. I mean, we're talking 3,000 years old, people. Mithras worship, Yule worship, all of these other pagan gods, all of them surrounded solstice worship. This is literally a point we can't get around, and we can track the calendars. December 25th is when solstice worship happened on the Julian calendar, okay? Our calendars have shifted since then on the Gregorian calendar, but historically we know this is when solstice worship happened. This is the root to December 25th. It is not Yeshua's birth, Yahusha's birth, Jesus' birth. It's just not. And even the biblical texts, based on what we have discussed earlier, show that. So here's my conclusion. Because, you know, I sympathize. Christmas is a really difficult one. I'm not unempathetic to this situation. I mean, this is even a battle my parents had to fight because my dad grew up in a Catholic house. My mother grew up in an evangelical Christian house. We didn't come to Torah until much later in life. One of the points I made earlier is renewed covenant believers, they didn't celebrate Jesus' birth. It's not my only argument, but if it was something that was really important to be celebrated as a birthday, you would think that we would at least find hints of it in the renewed covenant. My other point would be, should it not be a red flag to us that the world loves Christmas? If we're called to be a peculiar and set apart people, should it not be a red flag that the world loves Christmas and that even Wiccans are willing to celebrate Christmas? And you know what? Let's assume for the moment that you are on board with all of the data that I have shown today. I have heard the argument. Well, it was pagan, but we are redeeming what was once a pagan holiday and it's no longer pagan because we have co-opted it as Christians. And my question to you would be this. Is this how God asks us to worship him? Because God does spell out how he wants to be worshipped. That's my question. Where else in scripture do we see people trying to worship God in the ways that they knew? From their culture, quote unquote, redeeming a pagan practice and dedicating it to Yahweh. I think Exodus is pretty clear about this. Exodus 32, 5-7. And when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow is a feast unto Yahweh." And they rose up early on the morrow and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. And Yahweh said unto Moses, "Go, get thee down, for thy people which thou broughtest out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves." How did they corrupted themselves? By worshiping God through a golden calf. They took what they knew from their culture and they dedicated it to Yahweh, and they tried to redeem a pagan practice, and God was displeased, and a whole bunch of them ended up dying. So I don't think that we can say that we have any biblical evidence for redeeming things that are pagan and taking them for ourselves, because we've seen how that has played out in scripture. Again, I have empathy on Christmas. I've touched on it a couple of times, even in my local community, but it's something that I don't typically try to push because I realize it's something that's intrinsically very personal to people. It's extremely steeped in tradition. There's a lot of family obligation that's surrounding it. I get it. The world loves Christmas. That's why it's hard. Actually, I recall one of the aha moments for my own grandfather. He's passed now, rest in peace. I loved my Paka. But he was talking to my mom about the fact that we didn't celebrate Christmas as I started to get a little bit older. And she asked him, "How long have you celebrated Christmas?" And he said, "My whole life." And then she asked him, "How long have you been a Christian?" He paused in acknowledgement because my grandfather didn't come to Christ until my mother was 7 years old, but he has celebrated Christmas his entire life. And that's not a pattern that's unique to my grandfather, because we see a lot of the world celebrates Christmas today. Christians and pagans, because it's something that's easy. And it kind of ostracizes ourselves because everybody else is doing it. But is that not what we're called to do? Is to be a peculiar and set apart people. It's not an easy topic. It can be divisive among families. But for the person out there that's struggling, I want to give you a little bit of hope because Yahusha himself told us, Matthew 10:34-39, "Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I have not come to send peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's foes shall be thy of his own household. He that loveth his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he that taketh not his cross and followeth after me is not worthy of me. He that findeth his life shall lose it, and he that loseth his life for my sake shall find it." Likewise, we hear in 2 Timothy, because I'm sure you're going to get pushback. But we hear in 2 Timothy, "Preach the word, be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort, with all long suffering and doctrine. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. But after their own lusts shall they heap themselves to teachers having itching ears." Tell me what I want to hear, basically. "And they shall turn away their ears from truth, and shall be turned unto fables. But watch thou in all things, endure afflictions, do the work of evangelist, make full proof of thy ministry, for I am now ready to be offered, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought a good fight, I have finished my course, I have kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid upon me a crown of righteousness, with the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me in that day, and not only me, but unto all them that love his appearing." The fact of the matter is, sometimes the truth brings us together, and sometimes the truth divides. But if holding fast in your beliefs is divisive, know that that's to be expected. I'm expecting a lot of pushback in this comment section for coming out and talking about what I believe to be true. I do it anyways because I don't want the perceptions of other people to curtail how I choose to go forward and research what I believe to be true and share that as best I can. All I can do when the truth divides is pray that seeds that are planted will eventually blossom, and that connection will come as people come around to truth. That's my hope and prayer for those that I love. But here's the deal. God tells us in the scripture how he wants to be celebrated. He tells us how he wants to be worshipped. This is why I still follow the feasts. You might not be there yet. That's fine. But what can't be understated here is celebrating appointed times by the world, surrounded by the worship of gods that are not Yahweh, is something that we should abhor, and to me there is no compromise to be made. I will leave you with this, with the Bible verse that you likely know very well, but I feel like ties all of this in and is a good place for us to leave off today. Joshua 24:15. "And if it seem evil unto you to serve Yahweh, choose you this day whom ye will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served and were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve Yahweh." I love you, brothers and sisters. I do. Please hear the heart that I'm coming at you with. I think so many people are under the spell of Christmas and these other Gregorian, pagan-rooted holidays. And the lies are so deep and so insidious on purpose because the enemy wants to keep us from the truth. But I really believe if we hold fast and we look to worship God in the ways that he asks, he is the Father of all creation, and my heart's desire is to worship him, to get to know him. And how am I supposed to get to know someone if I never show up for them the way that they need? I don't think that this is a salvation issue, so please don't hear what I'm not saying, but it is a relationship issue. I am not going to put all of my tradition around worshiping God on a day that is steeped in paganism. I choose to not celebrate it because I don't believe that's what the heart of Yah desires from me. Again, I hope you hear my heart. This isn't even a chastisement of Michael Knowles because I'm a huge Michael Knowles fan. But the reason I felt like it was important to address this very conversation is because these lies are put out there by the enemy on purpose. Because God is very clear about how he wants us to worship him. And where can you find that? You can find it in your Bible. So until next time, we love you. May Yah bless you and keep you. May He make His light shine upon you. We'll see you next time. Shalom.